U.S. intelligence agency, mind control.
Netanyahu is doing an April Fool's. Oh boy. I don't know if this one's an April Fool's. Israeli airstrike destroys Iranian consulate in Syria. Okay. Man, I love our great ally in the Middle East who definitely helps project regional stability. Rogue state. Seriously. A senior Revolutionary Guards commander, Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi, was among the dead. That's great. Isn't that like an attack on Iran directly? Yeah, it might as well be. This is, yeah. We're never having Middle Eastern stability, dog. Holy shit. I've been hearing about this. BB wants to escalate. Netanyahu understands that the moment the war ends, he's out. He's insanely unpopular. The only reason he's still in power is because of October 7th and the war cabinet. So if the war never ends, he never leaves. Forever war. Hell yeah. Hezbollah, hell yeah. Houthis, sure, we'll find a way.
Because I
Iran,
started listening to it, and I got a certain amount of time in and heard the typical bad takes of Soleimani shouldn't have been killed. He's a good person type stuff that Vosh always does. And I was like, oh my God, we have to look at this on stream.
Holy shit. I've been hearing about this. BB wants to escalate. Netanyahu these operations. Several diplomats were among the dead. Would Biden back BB in a full-scale war in Syria Part 2? Well, the war wouldn't be with Syria, really. The Syria is just like a festering corpse of a failed state occupied by 50 different like terrorist and paramilitary groups.
No.
It's Iran here that's the issue. And Iran is a real country with a real military. Iran says the response will be harsh. Rogue
Is
state
Iran
shit,
a real
man.
country?
Anyway, if you're asking if
military?
Biden would support Netanyahu in a war with Iran,
I don't think
you
it is
have to
real
forgive
military.
me for my naivete, but I must. Okay, I have to say this. I feel like that might actually be a real red line. Like, there are limits, and dragging the entire Middle East into, like, the largest regional war in decades might actually be one. I don't know. Maybe he would. Maybe he would. Maybe Biden would go like, yeah, Iran, the axis of terror, we got to support her. But who knows? Like, who knows?
Sneeko posted, I stand with Iran, and it was very funny.
Didn't he also say he wanted to go to the Taliban?
Yeah, but who cares about that? The whole thing of standing with Iran because there was a bomb hitting there. And of course, all the Salafi fucking hate Iran, right?
Yeah.
So it was very funny on like the more extremist side of the internet, especially in the Syrian networks. And somebody said, my take on it was like, bro, it like literally like the Taliban are a better choice to back than Iran. Like I have more positive things to say about the Taliban, honestly.
Yeah.
But somebody asked, they're like, why is Iran worse to the Taliban? Like, I think I know where you're coming from, but I just want to hear your reasoning. I was like, they're both exporting terrorism. They're both like, as far as all the terrorism stuff, they're aligned, right? They're both on October 7th. But at the end of the day, the Taliban are only interested in Pashtun nationalism and the Durand line, right? That ideology might evolve with like more, if James is correct, with more like Haqqani powers. But Haqqani is more diplomatic with the Pakistani government anyway, so it's kind of not in the interest with the rest of the Taliban. But Iran itself is now that ISIS and al-qeada are wiped out, is now the main force in the region that's deteriorating the region.
Okay.
So now that ISIS and al-qeada are gone, the IRGC is worse. It is the worst terrorist group for regional stability right now. So any action that diminishes the IRGC is default good. They're basically the new ISIS in charge.
Zionist John. Supporting Israel's strike.
Of course I support them bombing the fucking IRGC.
Yes.
But who knows?
Look at his
why the hell would Israel do that? They're
knows?
warmongering ethno-nationalist fascists. And Netanyahu wants to keep the war going. Because they're evil. Netanyahu's government, I should say, not the Israeli people. Only about half of the Israeli people are evil. Are they trying to goad Hezbollah into actually attacking? That's Lebanon, different country. But this isn't going to help. Vosh, the Israeli population is pretty uniquely Hitlerite. Yeah, think of them kind of like a Russian population. Like civilians are civilians, but they're subjected to a nonstop barrage of propaganda convincing them that being Hitler is the only way to be, Biden absolutely would support Israel in a regional war against Iran. Look, I'm not going to argue. I'm not arguing this point. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't think anyone here, including myself, can fully appreciate just how destabilizing that would be. You know, we're talking about like an incomprehensible escalation that would be a net negative for literally ever. Actually, there is exactly one entity that would benefit from this, and it would be the Ayatollah. That is it. Iran would never lose such a war. Maybe they wouldn't like make any gains, but they wouldn't lose Iran, you know, and it would legitimize
I would say that there already
Islamic
is a
rule.
war throughout the Middle East that's led by Iran.
Okay. Justify it.
I think there is a certain, and unlike the rhetoric with Israel, where it's like Israel has the right to self-defense. No. Iraq has the right to self-defense. Syria does too. Like Assad has every right to self-defense. He just is committing war crimes like Israel does. But like Jordan is there. They're hurting Jordan. They're hurting OPEC. They're hurting the economy in the region. They're hurting Kurds in the region. Look at Lebanon. Lebanon's fucked. Lebanon could be one of the best economies in the region. A fucking all coastal country in the center. Could be an export powerhouse in the Middle East.
Yep.
And import powerhouse. Instead, their ports blow up from government incompetence. Thanks to people like Iran, who are tied to it because it's the nitrates. I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but this is a little investigative thing that I did when I was sick that I never like published or anything. But the nitrates that were used in the Beirut blast, the accidental blast, right? They were brought there on a Russian ship that was barely seaworthy, right? That was backed by a Russian oligarch. It's literally smuggling nitrates to Assad. And the same time that this boat was seized by port authorities who basically made them pay a ransom fine, right? And then they held the boat because it wasn't seaworthy. The amount like that's there is like there's like it's not a full load, right? As in they stopped somewhere and somebody skimmed what they were delivering.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you can go back and this is before they were Bellingcat, but Brown Moses, they have an article on Assad's barrel bombs and their evolution, right? The same time that this article is dated, showing the change in composition when they stop using cigarettes as fuses and actually start being able to modify pressure plates and advance the barrel bomb. It's switched to nitrate based. So before it wasn't, and then all of a sudden it was nitrate based. The same time that this smuggler was caught in Lebanon, that later led to the city being destroyed. It's literally associated with the IRGC. This disaster
of Iran for another 50 years. How far are Iranian nukes? Nobody knows. We don't think they have them yet, but we're not exactly operating on the best intel. Netanyahu's government's also trying to draft Haredis, which is causing instability in the government. Yeah, the ultra-Orthodox. Man, this guy really doesn't want to go to war. If they have
Iran had a nuclear program when the Shah was around. The fact that they haven't been able to obtain nukes is saying something. If they didn't do it in the fucking 80s, they're never gonna fucking do it. They just it's sanctions work.
Is uniquely vulnerable to nuclear retaliation because their nation is so small. Whatever nukes Iran will develop in the future will be small nukes, but Israel is small enough that you have a proportionally devastating target for nuclear reprisal either way. Iran, comparably, is a difficult target to nuke because a lot of it is just empty mountain ranges that are,
almost like there's better weapons.
What are the odds that BB goes nuclear?
Nukes?
Like literally, I don't know. They're not zero. Would Iran give a shit about hitting neighboring countries? Yes, absolutely, 100% yes. Iran isn't just like North Korea or whatever. Iran has ties to a bunch of local countries, both to their governments and to like ethnic and martial groups.
They're occupying and infiltrating the region. They're more like China than North Korea. Getting their fucking web, sticky fingers and everything. They're not building nuke stock,
gung ho with their nukes. Anyway, I don't think things are going to.
If you're going to build a WMD, why would they not pursue chemicals?
You're making the mistake of assuming they would give a shit.
Yeah.
Also, not necessarily. Also, if there was nuclear war, I think Israel would be the one to start it. I think that
I
Israel
think
is a
Iran
less
I
knows.
rational
actually
actor
agree
than
with him.
I think Iran
Actually
is
agree with him.
yeah. Well, that's something that we've said for a long time, and I'll come back to that. But I think Iran knows how worthless nukes actually are for them.
Yeah.
Now, that said, nuclear energy would benefit Iran, and that's why they were
Mhm.
interested in the deal with Obama to begin with. That said, Israel nuking people, it is a belief among like nuclear strategists that Israel almost did use them. Basically, if Assad Senior didn't fuck up so royally in the war, but when Sadat crossed the river and took back the Sinai, he left himself strategically open for a tactical nuke to take out his entire forces. It was one of the
Yes.
few points in history where basically, like, they say, like, there had to have been a conversation. Somebody who's a nuclear strategist in the government had to have said, hey, they're wide open for a nuclear attack, at the very least. Had to have happened.
You would think so.
It had to have happened. It's
by
just
far at this point. I
impossible
think the
that it
Ayatollah
didn't.
and the
That's what the person's job
Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm.
revolutionary government of Iran are more rational actors. They've acted consistently in their own best interest, or at least pretty close to it for a while. Israel has literally just been like shitting the bed and tearing up the cushions for a while. It's insane. They're not even acting in their own best interest, really. It's just Netanyahu trying to cling on to power. How much support would Israel actually lose if they nuked someone? This is, again, I speak to my naivete here, but I think if Israel even tried to actually use their nuclear weapons, I'm thinking media blackout, 24 hours of silence, Shmeten Shmahu is in charge of
main
Israel
reason
after the lights
why
come back
Israel
on.
wouldn't use nukes is the potential for it to trigger an arms race after breaking the nuclear taboo. When Israel uses a nuke and people realize that, oh, Israel did way more damage with just the regular bombs so far, and that
True.
thought becomes international, it then becomes all of Israel's neighbors saying, hey, they have those type of weapons, why don't we? It's a potential to trigger an arms race, which puts Israel more at threat because they're small enough to actually be taken out with nukes, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
They're like, whoa, Netanyahu, he fell down the stairs. We're really sorry. Hey, sorry, man. We're going to take the government in a whole new direction. That's my hope. This might be like a pseudo conspiratorial belief that I have in that it's a desire for there to be some control and order in the world. But I would like to believe with the immense power of the United States that we do have some kind of contingency for this behavior that isn't like, just let them nuke the Middle East.
Bro,
That's
we
like a
stood
hope.
by Saddam.
Assad is insane, but not suicidal. They could do it themselves. Oh, who knows? So if that happened, would we even know
Yeah.
what
We
happened?
helped.
I don't know. We're
we
really far
literally
into speculation territory.
when Saddam went to commit the Kurdish genocide, the Anfal campaign, the United States was like, "Oh, here's a map of where the Iranian-backed ones are." That's facilitating genocide.
Yeah.
Come on,
Yeah, it
for
is.
Saddam Hussein of all
Like,
people. Come on, this idealism and these fucking liberal cucks, man.
Yeah.
Here, I can't really say. I gotta say though, man, striking the goddamn consulate, Jesus Christ! This is
It
the
was an
expression of a
IRGC
man who has
base.
to open a State Department.
You see who it is? You see who it is? This is the AP guy who's an Assadist that they always let in the White House. Bad guy to cut to. Bad guy to cut to. Not the there's about every basically I'd rather hear from the China person in there, the one who said not saying a Chinaman, the guy or girl who's there to be a foreign reporter for China. This guy, this fucking moron.
Press briefing
This is our
with
Claire
let's start
Daly.
with Gaza. This is the perfect expression to enter into that, that realm with. In terms of Secretary, come on, Vosh, it's April Fool's, go easy. Fine, mods,
Bro,
I'm bad,
get a
Michael
fucking
Seraph.
modern technology.
State Department's involvement with this virtual meeting today. Can you tell us with the Israelis about Rafah?
So the secretary is at the White House right now, participating in the meeting with representatives of the Israeli government to
Boo!
lay out an alternative approach to.
Is a consulate
He's
a reasonable
worse.
military
He's
target?
worse
No,
than
it is like
Matt
the
from
least
the
reasonable
AP.
military target. It is like the most like instigatory but militarily ineffective target possible. It is like it's remarkably so. Yeah, it's a civilian building, and it's not just a civilian building. It's like a
Well, then why
government
were the
civilian- it's
IRGC
ridiculous.
in it? I think Israel's got a
the
solid
Iranian
case on this one.
and-
If
Oh,
we
look,
bombed the
Stream
building
Deck
and
on
fucking
set.
Osama bin Laden was in there, what'd you say?
I could get a stream deck.
Who wants to buy Jack a copy of Helldivers 2?
No, get me a Stream Deck instead. Then I can hit buttons and have sound bites.
Oh, I
That'll
thought
be
you meant a
great.
Steam Deck.
No, Stream Deck. No,
Okay.
no. The thing that
Okay.
you can preload sound bites on.
Didn't this guy's wife die
That way
while he was doing a press conference? I don't know. But like seriously, like imagine if we bombed a consulate and fucking Bin Laden was inside, or Julian Assange. No, but seriously, like if we killed Bin Laden in a consulate, like how far is the hey doing the consulate? How far is that argument gonna go for real?
Yeah.
Hey, you know where a consulate was attacked that totally wasn't a consulate? Benghazi. Same thing. Why was the CIA there?
Rafa.
Shouldn't have been
When
there.
I walked out, the meeting had not yet broken, or at least I'm not aware of it yet having broken, and expect a statement from the White House upon its conclusion.
Okay. Well, was there anything specifically that the State Department wanted to convey to get across to the Israelis in this?
Does anybody have a timestamp for when they mentioned the attack on the consulate?
So I don't want to speak too specifically about the meeting that is.
See, even he doesn't want to listen to
It would be
State
great if
Department.
Hamas would
That's
stop
so
hiding behind
terrible.
civilians and stop
fuck
hiding
off.
inside civilian infrastructure, including hospitals. But two,
It would be
Inside
great
the
if you
skulls of
stopped hiding
Palestinian
behind
children, right?
Israel.
Yeah.
Very mean of them to hide there.
Points out what we have been saying all along, which is the need for Israel to have a sustainable long-term strategy when it comes to Gaza. That it's not enough to just clear
What does that
certain
mean?
neighborhoods or hospitals or any other geographic areas or buildings of Hamas. They need to have a long-term sustainable strategy that is not just a security strategy, but also a political
Why do all American spokesmen look like greasy used car salesmen? I'm not joking when I say this, and I know chat's going to groan, but a lot of it is the poor fits.
strategy if they really want to secure the future of Israel against the terrorist threat that has to date emanated from Gaza.
Okay, so you don't have any comment on what you've seen from the aftermath of the 2-week operation against
I want to see
Not beyond
mention
what
of
I
the
just said.
and then when
itself against those opponents.
4415-ish is when it first gets accessed. Okay, 4415.
Plan that Israel is supposed to present to you.
Why don't we just wait? Let's. I think I've probably talked enough about these ongoing talks. Let's wait for what we'll have to say about them at the conclusion. Go ahead. Yeah.
Lebanon. You've been saying you are trying to resolve the issue on the northern borders diplomatically. You've been successful so far, but are you concerned that now it's been escalating for the last 2 weeks?
And what we're going to continue to for Gaza and the West Bank and the how to rebuild Gaza.
Please, the U.S. ambassador met the KDP leader twice. So, do you have any concern that the election, the carry?
No.
Come back to you about.
Because remember,
yeah,
fashion talk
this
is
like
literally
constantly.
what got him into that lolly folder to begin with. It's directly tied to it.
We'll move on for now and then come back if there's more time. Go ahead.
Per the CBS 60 Minutes reporting that aired on Sunday, a first incident of Havana syndrome took place in Frankfurt with an employee of the US consulate. This happened 2 years before the already known cases that occurred in Havana in 2016. Can you confirm there was an incident
like the way
in 2014,
like
at least one
goblins
incident
get
in Frankfurt
drawn
that
in
led to
porn?
apparent
They're all
Havana
like
syndrome symptoms?
thick,
So
short
we have made it
stacks.
a practice to not confirm or comment on specific reports.
Decision taken like
So
recently.
I think it would be helpful to step back and put this in a little context. And the context is that the United States has a decades-long commitment to Israel's security. Israel is surrounded by entities that are sworn to its destruction, not just Hamas, but Iran and proxy groups that Iran sponsors, Hezbollah among them, who have repeatedly talked about their desire for the destruction of Israel. We believe Israel has every right to defend itself against those opponents. And we, to that end, have a long-standing
They're so
security relationship
annoying.
with them where we provide them more than $3 billion annually in security assistance. Now, the way that works...
Israel made peace with almost all of its immediate neighbors. Yeah, that's the funny thing, you know? People talk about Israel being under constant threat, but honestly, like, up until Netanyahu's government, things had been kind of like turning down.
Yeah,
You know, there
almost
had
like
been
they're
improvements
lying.
diplomatically. Even under Netanyahu's government, like there had been
on.
improvements diplomatically because you know other countries in the
Don't
Middle East
save
also kind
another
of don't
image.
want constant permanent war. Like there are radical Islamist groups, a lot of them funded by Iran, but also like you know things have mellowed out at least to some extent. But this is elevating everything. It's making it way more dangerous for Israelis.
I know you prefaced this in your question, but just for the benefit of everyone else, the way that works is we provide them with $3.3 billion a year.
I don't think I'm going to find the part with
security
the
They don't always
consulate
draw
strike,
all of that
guys.
down in any given year, but they come to the United States, request certain defense articles. We make assessments about whether those are appropriate or not. We notify them to Congress in the regular course of business. And oftentimes what happens, let's say, just as an example, this is a fictional example, let's say they requested 100 planes. We make a decision, we notify Congress. That doesn't mean that they take 100 planes tomorrow once that notification has been given, once the approval has been given. They draw those down over time, and sometimes it takes years to fulfill those requests. And so those are the types of things that I see.
Is it me or is he nervous? To an extent, yeah. Nobody in the State Department is happy right now. A bunch of people literally resign over what's happening right now in Gaza. they're not happy. You know, they have to toe the line. They're government employees,
Maybe
after
they
all, not
should do
ideologues,
something.
politicians. Their job is to represent the interests and
Yeah.
will of the executive branch. They don't have like an they're not fully autonomous, you know. So they're kind of in a position where they have to constantly defend like lunatic shit, and there's not really anything they can do, you know.
Wanting to go, bear with me. I know this is long, and then you'll have the opportunity for follow up. Those are the types of things that often take years to fulfill, and they were happening before October 7th, and they have continued after October 7th. So what these are about, in many cases, are about self-defense, but also deterrence and replenishment. And so we make these in the regular course of business. And what I can tell you about them is that we follow the same procedures with respect to everyone that we do for every other country in the world, which is that we notify Congress. And in fact, since October 7th, we have gone above and beyond to notify Congress about these transfers. There is a statutory threshold where we are required to notify them of transfers. We have been regularly briefing the committees to make them aware of every transfer that we are making.
So I'm going to have to combine my questions now that you've taken up so much time for that answer. I understand.
I apologize, but you believe it.
I'm just joking. Of course, take your time. I understand fulfilling can take years, but are you basically saying that the authorization of the transfer coming in these recent weeks was a coincidence?
So I'm not saying it's a coincidence that Israel has been engaged in a military conflict. And of course, when you are engaged in a military conflict, you deplete your military stocks.
So there was a request in recent weeks for the additional fulfillment of these particular weapons.
As is always the case, I'm not getting into the timings of exact requests from here. I'll be quick. But this is a process that we keep Congress.
That's a yes.
Of our relevant committees. But when you see these types of requests when they get publicly reported, you have to remember that Israel is in an armed conflict and is expending a great deal of defense material, and some of that needs to be.
And those civilians don't kill themselves.
Right. And my final thing on this is like Secretary and a lot of senior officials from this administration basically said far too many Palestinians have been killed. But when you go,
is this not the lady that mentions the goddamn consulate attack? Are we never going to find that mentioned?
And we know that the administration's policy hasn't changed. It is not conditioning weapons to Israel. But when you go and make such an authorization of the transfer in recent weeks, even if the actual weapons transfer has been approved years ago, don't you think that is going to damage the weight of your word, your credibility, and basically your sincerity in saying that far too many Palestinians?
So I do not agree with that at all. We have been very clear that we want to see Israel do everything it can to minimize civilian casualties. We have made clear that they need to do that they need to operate.
Banning the use of the word ceasefire from the State Department. It's the beginning of her questions. Neptune, you're really throwing me for a loop here.
Okay, two final things. This is about from last week about these authorizations of these bombs to Israel. They have been approved a long time ago by Congress, but looks like the department has.
What a terrible Vosh video!
On how many civilians around that operation have been killed?
We do not.
Okay.
It's him clicking around going, where did
this.
they say it in the State Department thing? And all he's going to say is that no, the other guy said the shack shit about how they have never committed a crime and done anything wrong.
Yep, I'm moving on. Moving on.
This morning, the twisted remains of World Central Kitchen armored vehicles destroyed by an Israeli strike. The U.S. charity says 7 of its staff were killed in the attack, and now it's halting its aid operations in Gaza. The victims include a dual U.S.-Canadian citizen, as well as people with British, Australian, Polish, and Palestinian citizenship.
A lot of people very, very happy to see us.
Chef Jose Andres, who founded World Central Kitchen, calling them angels, and adding, the Israeli government needs to stop this indiscriminate killing, stop using food
Let me
as a
just
weapon.
say something about
Andres' organization.
That guy, Jose Andres, right? That man is probably one of the best people on planet Earth. The amount of harm reduction he's done, and the fact that he's not tied to like a UN organization, like obviously like the defunding of the UN aid, right? Israel just accusing them of being linked to terrorists, right? And when if they show a map of this, especially, you can tell how blatant and strategic it is. Have you seen the photos of the roofs of these cars? You're telling me, you're telling me an airline pilot won't, or an airplane pilot won't be able to see that the fucking banner for this kitchen is on the roof of the car. And not only that, they were just approved to do the mission.
Yeah.
And now they're banned, right? Oh, you're going to tell me this wasn't deliberate, Israel? Okay.
Was the first to bring desperately needed food into Gaza by sea. He spoke about his mission to get food to northern Gaza on Today.
We need to do everyday shipments to the north. We can solve the hunger problem in the north. Everybody working together, we can be successful.
The Israeli military calling the killings a tragic incident and says it's launched a thorough review at the highest levels.
I hate
its
Israel
spokesman saying he
so
talked to
much.
Chef Andres.
We are committed to examining our operations thoroughly and transparently.
But
Fuck
the charity
off.
says its staff were traveling
Least
in a
transparent
3-vehicle
country.
convoy clearly
Least
marked with its
transparent
logo,
country.
and
All
that it
right?
coordinated
Let me
their
tell
movements
you.
with the Israeli military ahead of time. The White House urging Israel
We know
to
more
swiftly
about what's
investigate
going
what
on
happened.
inside fucking China as a population, right? most of the like the disinformation is still stronger, right? Most people believe bad stuff, but the fact is the actual truth that is known about China is way more than the truth that is known about Israel to the mass public.
Yep.
One victim, Australian Zomi Francom, an experienced aid worker. Damien Sobel from Poland was also killed, according to his local mayor. Israel facing questions about the accuracy of its strikes in Gaza. As elsewhere, rising fears of a wider war. This fiery explosion destroying an Iranian diplomatic building in Syria yesterday. Iran says the blast killed 7 officers from the Revolutionary Guard. Now it's blaming Israel and saying that as an ally, the U.S. must answer.
There he is again. There he is again.
Israel neither
two
confirming nor
Sulaimanis,
denying it was
one
behind that strike in Syria,
hand.
but its forces are on high alert for potential Iranian retaliation. Last night, the Israeli military says an Iranian-made drone hit one of its naval bases. There were no casualties, but Israel calling it a very serious incident.
Good congestion, and you have the little special.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
This is a much better sign up. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
In the Middle East after an airstrike that killed several senior Iranian commanders.
Like there's a company that has all these flag graphics where they're like 2 flags together, right? And they like charge for packages on all these fucking media like packages. You buy like basically stock sound, stock graphics and stuff. And so this company makes a killing just by doing that.
It's quite funny.
Tracking the latest from Tel Aviv. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, George. Yeah, as Iran vows to retaliate for an attack on its consulate in Syria, Israel has expressed its
Why are they
sincere
putting
sorrow.
this up like these now?
Were killed delivering food.
And this is what's funny about them talking about like who they build an idol to, SpongeBob or Spider-Man or something. And I'm just like, well, like why are you idolizing things? Like that's weird, bro. Like stop.
This morning, 7 aid workers, including a dual US-Canadian citizen, killed while delivering desperately needed aid in northern Gaza in the aftermath of the Israeli airstrike on their vehicle. Gruesome
I would
video
say
showing the bodies of some of
definitely
the
Hezbollah is more of a concern because even I at one point I thought when the U.S. applied a little bit of pressure, it seemed like they were going to, in response to this U.S. pressure, pull more into southern Lebanon in response to the pressure. So I can see that happening, and we have to say that Rafah has been delayed this long because of countries like Egypt. Like, so it's now de-escalated enough that I think if Israel went into Rafah, nothing would happen. But a few weeks ago, that was not the case. It was pretty tense for a minute. If Biden starts withholding support, or even just actually wags a finger at, this could happen. I think they should just. I think they've already kind of backed the opposition and made it very clear that that's what they're doing. But the standing by on this aid strike, it's just. I mean, you have to answer the questions. You know, it's not like you can avoid this type of questioning going on.
victims, which include Polish, British, Australian, and Palestinian citizens. The World Central Kitchen now saying it is pausing Gaza operations following the attack on its workers. This as regional tensions escalate. Iran vowing revenge after an airstrike in Syria killed 2 of its top commanders and 5 officers.
It just pisses me off
Iran
because
and
the
Syria
US is
blaming
very
Israel for the attack, though Israel
and then
has
it
yet
comes to shit like this, and they can't be transparent at all. Like, fuck off, bro. The U.S. should launch an investigation, a transparent investigation, open how they do in other things. Instead, this is how they cover for war criminals in like Iraq and Afghanistan. Not serious ones that like did the rape of that girl and like broke her family's arms and shit, and then ate hot wings after. But like more minimal executions, stuff like that. They'll cover for them just like this. No transparency there either. Until Julian Assange came.
yet to comment. The strike reportedly 6 missiles from Israeli warplanes leveling a multi-story building just next to the Iranian embassy in Damascus.
People have been
The Iranian
posting.
ambassador in Syria saying such crimes and violations.
They've been posting this thing. Gotta find it.
international law will have its response in an appropriate time. The attack comes as Israel has intensified strikes on Iranian military targets and Iran's allies in the region since the start of Israel's war with Hamas.
Can we get a part 2 of this in response to this? They're posting that video of that guy crying over it.
Talks with the US over Israel's planned invasion of Gaza's southernmost
For what,
city
girl
of
and
Rafah.
chicken wings?
Israel
Okay,
agreeing to take into account
this is
US
side
concerns
tangent. But I'll pull it up. I'll just show you where to find more information.
over civilian casualties. And on that aid worker attack, we've just learned that a second NGO has paused operations.
Well, President Biden says that he is outraged and heartbroken by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza that killed 7 aid workers. In a statement yesterday, the president criticized Israel, saying that it hasn't done enough to protect aid workers and civilians.
We've impressed upon the Israelis the absolute imperative of doing more to protect innocent civilian lives, be they Palestinian children, women, and men, or be they aid workers.
This is the
World Central
name
Kitchen,
of the victim, right? Who they murder her after. So if you look this, I'll send it in chat. If you look that up to copy it, you will be able to read more about it. The wiki has enough of the information here. One guy got sentenced to life in prison. They had been like planning this crime for weeks, and like just specifically looking at this little girl. And this is probably one of the more serious crimes that people actually care about. Like Abu Ghraib is like more media attention than this one, but this one is especially heinous. The details that are known about it, and this is one of the few times where they were transparent and like took these guys right, because nobody would accept something like this. This is not just like an execution of a prisoner or something. People turn the other cheek, or turn the blind eye to executions and things like that. But it's a long story that I don't really feel like getting into. I already did an Iraq war tangent today, but if you want to read more, there it is. I recommend not reading about it, honestly.
Game streaming incoming, because I just bought a capture card.
Yeah, who wants to buy Jack
British
Helldivers
citizens,
too?
Polish and
Do you
Australian
know
nationals,
YouTube
a dual
demonetized
U.S.
this?
Canadian national.
They did indeed. They hate news. YouTube
Yeah.
hates news unless you're established already on the mainstream press.
So
And
if
then you get
you
a pass
want to
because
see
it's
more
apparently
in-depth
not
stories,
YouTube anymore.
if you want to see more in-depth stories like I just did analyzing Iraq and this political situation to further understanding of countries that I actually can follow and know about, like Turkey, I don't remember what the parties are called, but we're raising money to start an NGO that's going to help journalists in these countries, actually, fund the free press. You can just go to the Patreon link. You can just give us $1. You can cancel it right after. Anything helps. Here's Junk to tell you more.
We might have people watching this show, but you can be the difference maker, because we just need our audience to be paid members, and then this show can be around forever. So you can make that difference. Click join now.
I got no monies. Go steal your mom's credit card. That's a joke. That's technically why I just committed a crime, telling people to do that. That's a joke. Don't do that.
And a Palestinian. The charity's founder, renowned chef
Look at that
Jose
strike.
Andres, suspended the group's
Yeah.
operations in Gaza. Our Holly Williams is following the very latest on all of this from Tel Aviv.
There's no way it wasn't intentional.
Good morning. World Central Kitchen has named Jacob Flickinger, a 33-year-old dual US-Canadian citizen, as one of 7 of its team members who were killed by the Israeli military in Gaza. The others were British, Polish, Australian, and Palestinian.
Very funny
It appears
joke.
a
I'm
convoy
laughing
of
at the obvious joke. And like I've said in the
cars
past,
with
even if you donate once, I'll keep your name at the bottom until it fills up.
Formagen.
with strikes multiple times, even though the non-profit says it was coordinating its movements with Israel's
Fucking
military.
meow.
The chief of staff of Israel's military has called the incident a grave mistake, saying, quote, "It was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night during a war in very complex conditions." The US government says it's outraged by the deaths and is calling on Israel to carry out a swift and impartial investigation. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu
that'll
called
happen.
the incident tragic and unintentional, also saying, quote, this happens in war. Relations between the US and Israel appear increasingly strained, even though America is Israel's most important ally. Under a deal signed by the Obama administration, the US agreed to give Israel $3.8 billion a year in military assistance. Nowhere is the tension more evident than over Israel's planned offensive in Rafah in southern Gaza, where around 1.5 million Palestinians are sheltering, many of them in tents. Israel says it needs to destroy Hamas's remaining battalions, but the US is warning against an assault without a credible plan to protect civilians. Anne-Marie.
All right, Holly, thank you.
Israel is apologizing for the airstrike that killed 7 aid workers yesterday. The IDF says the strike was a mistake that followed a misidentification, and it's thoroughly investigating the incident.
Meanwhile, Iran continues to threaten retaliation against Israelis for an attack that killed 2 of its generals. Israel's defense chief
You famously said that the name Fredo was like the N word for
It's
Italian.
kind of mistake.
Yes, that was a mistake.
Was it that kind of mistake, Israel?
Anyone who hits Israel will pay a heavy price. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
This morning, the IDF Chief of Staff addressed the tragedy that took the lives of a team of international workers from World Central Kitchen as they returned from an aid delivery in Gaza.
I want to be very clear. The strike was not carried out with the intention of harming WCK aid workers. This incident was a grave mistake. Israel is at a war with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza.
This guy literally looks
the
like
unintentional harm.
The fucking German guy saying that the Nazis didn't mean to do something. Like, come on, you could not look more Hitler coded.
The strap across the chest too.
To the members of WCK.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally spoke with some of the leaders of the countries the victims were from.
It's only a matter of time. I mean, basically every stream that we do, it's like slightly better every time, especially on Fridays, which end up being like the best ones. And I think just people are so fed up with mainstream news, just seeing people rip it apart and criticize everything is like kind of a relief. And it's not like how everyone is kind of doing it, like Sam Cedar does it. They just show clips. It's like, okay, let's look at everything in context.
Yeah.
Because it's like if it's news broadcasting, it's free use. They can still that rapist at Channel 5, he just got his documentary taken down by a Las Vegas affiliate.
Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, because he used footage from them, and they basically Big Boy claimed him, where it turns the video red permanently. You can't re-upload it or anything.
Yeah, very cool.
Checking this thoroughly. We're in touch with the governments, and we will do everything for this not to happen again.
In the U.S., the White House is expressing outrage over how dangerous it is for aid workers in Gaza.
More than 200 aid workers have been killed in this conflict, making it one of the worst for aid workers in recent history. This incident is emblematic of a larger problem and evidence of why distribution of aid in Gaza has been so challenging.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military continues to prepare.
I hate them so much, bro. It's been challenging because Israel's stopping the trucks. Israel is what makes it challenging. Fuck these people, man.
Stronghold, but also temporary home to more than 1 million Gazan refugees. Why the Biden administration opposes the invasion, former Vice President Mike Pence says it's a necessity.
Israel has no choice but to invade Rafah and hunt down and destroy Hamas once and for all.
Rather than criticize Israel, Pence said Americans should fully support its war efforts against enemies sworn to wipe it off the map.
If Palestinians laid down their weapons right now and released all hostages, we'd have peace.
Oh my God!
Yeah, if Israelis laid down their weapons, we'd have no Israel.
On another front, Israel is bracing for
Oh
Iran
my God,
retaliating
bro.
after a top Iranian general and his aide were killed by a missile strike in Syria. That's being blamed on Israelis. But Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant warns whoever
Wasn't
hits
a missile.
Israel will pay a heavy price.
We operate everywhere, every day, in order to prevent our
This guy
enemies
is
from
a
gaining strength and in order
psychopath
to make
too.
it clear to anyone who acts against us all over the Middle East that the price for action against Israel will be a heavy one.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Oppose our genocide.
Anthony Blinken,
Yeah.
Secretary of State, meeting with his NATO counterparts in Brussels. An Israeli airstrike that killed aid workers in Gaza, one of them an American, is going to be a major topic. Trey Yinks has the follow-up. He's live in Tel Aviv today for us. Hello, Trey.
Hey, Bill, good morning. An independent investigation is being conducted into those Israeli strikes this week that killed 7 aid workers
This
from the
guy
world's
is
central kitchen.
legitimately good.
Israeli
The
officials
Fox
have been
News correspondent that they have in Israel. He's legitimately good. And I think he will have a pretty good career going after this.
outspoken about this incident, saying it was a result of misidentification. You can see in that video a hole in the top of an armored vehicle belonging to the World Central Kitchen. Initial reports indicate Israeli drones struck the SUV.
Yeah, no shit. Like, yeah, like it's like but they do this with like Cuba. Like, oh, like Cuba, the sanctions. I joked about it. You could say that if the government just dissolved itself, then there would be no sanctions and crisis. The government's blaming the sanctions. Well, why are the sanctions there? Like that type of shit. Like, it's just stupid. It's just so unrealistic. That's not how power works, Like, the Hamas doesn't care about the civilians dying. So, like, why are we using, and also, aside from that, why are we using civilian lives as a bargaining chip with terrorists, if that's the case? Like, but yes, hypothetically, if they did that, yes, hypothetically, actually, who knows with Israel? like sure, but the thing is that the hostages need to be released at this point. It's getting ridiculous. Like, whoever is blocking the settlement, they need to just move, just take them and push them somewhere else, like Bikini Bottom.
Traveling on the Al Rashid Road along the Mediterranean Sea when the incident took place. Overnight, Israel's chief of staff released a rare apology in English.
This incident was
Oh, you actually did make a former gen thing.
Israel is
I just
at war
realized.
with Hamas.
Yeah, I did.
Not with the people of Gaza. We are sorry for the unintentional harm to the members of WCK.
The incident will directly impact the ability for aid to get to Palestinian civilians. The World Central Kitchen has temporarily suspended operations in Gaza following the tragedy. President Biden released a statement Tuesday saying he was outraged by the deaths of these aid workers, adding that Israel is not doing enough to protect humanitarians in Gaza. We do understand that President Biden spoke over the phone with the World Central Kitchen founder, Jose Andres, to express his condolences.
Dinkelberg.
We'll follow it. Trey Yinks there in Tel Aviv reporting today. Thank you.
New this morning, President Joe Biden says he is, quote, outraged and heartbroken over the deaths of 7 aid workers in Gaza. In a statement Tuesday, Biden sharply criticized Israel for the deadly strike, saying, quote, Israel has not done enough to protect civilians. The 7 who lost their lives worked for World Central Kitchen, the organization founded by famed chef Jose Andres. The group says a convoy was hit leaving a warehouse where the team had unloaded more than 100 tons of humanitarian aid. The Israeli military says the deadly airstrike was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night. Biden says Israel's investigation must be swift and its findings must be made public. Coming up on Good Morning Hawaii in the next half hour, the latest from the Middle East as the bodies of those killed are transported out of Gaza.
And breaking right now, protesters reportedly heading for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's private home in Jerusalem, as Iran says that Israel will be punished after a deadly attack on an Iranian consulate in Syria that took out one of the leaders of these militia groups, an Iranian leader. So Israel has not confirmed that that strike came on their behalf. Correspondent Trey Yinks joins us now on all of this breaking news in Israel. Good afternoon. Hi, Trey.
Hey, Martha, good afternoon. I do want to start with this breaking news out of Jerusalem. I just spoke with someone on the phone who is in the city indicating that there are police outside of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's private residence, and they are currently clashing with demonstrators. These protesters took to the streets over the past 72 hours to demonstrate against the government, call for new elections, and for a ceasefire agreement to get the hostages out of Gaza. According to the person I spoke with on the phone, police are using water cannons and horses to disperse the crowd that is currently gathered in Jerusalem. We'll continue to follow that story. It comes as Israel is facing new threats and pressure from the Islamic Republic following a strike yesterday in Damascus, Syria, that we understand killed 7 members of Iran's IRGC, including 2 top generals. Overnight in Tehran, protesters gathered in the streets, burning both American and Israeli flags. They chanted "Death to America" and called on their own government to respond. Iranian officials echoed these calls today, with the country's supreme leader posting to X saying, quote, "We will make the Zionists regret this crime of attacking the Iranian consulate in Syria and other crimes like this by God's power and strength." Iranian President
how funny is that? How funny is it that Fox News is pulling up Ayatollah tweets as sources for this? The fact that dude still has an account is so funny. It's so funny that he's on Twitter. I know Twitter's not a real place, Jack.
also said the attack would not go
wasn't gonna do
unanswered.
it.
In the past, Iran has threatened harsh responses and then done nothing. But given the current state of affairs, Israeli forces are currently on high alert. We're also following one final developing story out of the Middle East today. Overnight, a series of Israeli strikes in Gaza killed 7 members of the World Central Kitchen. Among the dead are numerous foreign citizens, including one American. Graphic video circulated online of bodies at a local hospital inside Gaza. Some of these individuals still wearing protective gear. They were inside of an armored car when the explosions occurred. The Israelis say they are taking credit for the strikes, calling them tragic and unintentional. Israel says they will conduct a thorough investigation into what happened last night and make those findings public. Martha.
It's a real tragedy indeed. Trey, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for
Shut up.
What I know is that we were targeted deliberately, non-stop, until everybody was dead in this convoy. This happened over more than 1.5, 1.8 kilometers. So this was not just a bad luck situation where, oops, we dropped the bomb in the wrong place, or no, this was over 1.5, 1.8 kilometers with a very defined humanitarian convoy that had signs in the top, in the roof. That cannot be the role of an army. That cannot be the role of an army that has hundreds of drones above Gaza in any single moment. Humanitarians and civilians should never be paying the consequences of war. This is a basic principle of humanity. At the time, this looks like it's not a war against terrorism anymore.
Like these people,
it seems this is a war against humanity.
Are like essential. You know, like these workers are veterans with this company. It's not like you can replace this type of stuff.
Itself.
The United States, the UN, and other world powers on Tuesday condemned an Israeli airstrike that mistakenly killed 7 aid workers in Gaza. Video obtained by Reuters showed a large hole in the roof of a four-wheel drive vehicle belonging to the World Central Kitchen, a charity founded by celebrity chef Jose Andres. Paramedics were seen moving bodies into a hospital and displaying the passports of 3 of those killed. U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications John Kirby said the White House was outraged by the attack.
I think by saying
the
we're
amount
outraged,
of
I think you can
at this point,
fairly
who cares what
characterize
the
that
White?
as condemning the strike itself.
We get it. They were
Everyone wants to see
outraged and they're going to
this kind
do
of violence happen
nothing.
to humanitarian aid workers who, as was noted earlier, were doing all the right things.
The airstrike killed citizens of
They
Australia.
were doing all the right things. He means that they were identifying themselves as workers and coming out of a facility. Not that they were doing all the right things, that these are like genuinely irreplaceable human beings who have done nothing but good for the planet.
United States and Canada. Jessica Olney was a friend of Australian aid worker Zomi Francom, who was killed in the airstrike.
There's no words. You know, these are some of the best people out there doing the most important work. And people like Zomi are so selfless and only doing what they do because of their love for humanity. There's no other reason. It makes me feel like humanity has reached a new low to see something like this happen.
Israel's military expressed, quote, sincere sorrow over the incident. Here's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
See, I got theory for a second, but then I'm instantly back to being so fucking mad because they immediately had to bring this fucking ghoul up.
Today, there was a tragic case of our forces unintentionally hitting innocent people in the
Shut
Gaza
up.
Strip. This happens in wartime.
I hate you.
We are thoroughly looking into it.
Oopsie, it happens in
and we'll
war.
do everything to ensure it does not happen again.
The incident ratcheted up international pressure for steps to ease the disastrous humanitarian situation in Gaza. Nearly 6 months into Israel's siege and invasion of the Palestinian enclave, including from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
This is
well, that
uncomfortable,
doesn't matter.
but it is an inevitable result of the way the war is being conducted. It demonstrates yet again the urgent need for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
I would like the
hostages,
White House
and
to
the
adopt this
expansion
kind of rhetoric while still being equally as worthless, though.
humanitarian aid into Gaza, as the Security Council demanded in its resolution last week. The resolution must be implemented without delay.
The Israeli military pledged an investigation into the deaths of the aid workers by an independent, professional, and expert body.
This draft resolution deals with the most pressing matters. It calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza without a time limitation. It also demands the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. It condemns the terrorist attacks by Hamas that took place on October 7 and it demands an immediate and full humanitarian access. We are just starting. It's an ambitious project. It will take time. We need to consult everyone. As you know, the situation in the Gaza Strip is catastrophic. We call for the full and immediate implementation of Resolution 2728. Against this background, France is convinced that the Security Council should live up to its responsibilities. The two humanitarian resolutions tabled by Malta and the United Arab Emirates paved the way. The elected member, the E10 resolution, was a turning point a week ago. This council needs to do more. It cannot wait any longer.
The shock and anger against the latest wave of Israeli attacks in Gaza, this time on the streets of London. Medics in solidarity with Palestinians blockaded the headquarters of Palantir, the software company supplying technology to Israel's military, calling for an immediate end to its activities there. The killing of humanitarian aid workers received international condemnation. Israel's allies, including the UK, demanded answers.
The situation is increasingly intolerable, and what we urgently need to see is a thorough, transparent investigation into what has happened, but also a dramatic increase in the amount of
someone other than Biden. Even though it's the same thing, I'm less pissed hearing from him, and I'm like, oh, good. Fucking Rishi's fucking saying something good. I'm actually happy now that somebody's saying something, and it's the same things that I've already heard, and I'm acknowledging that it's just as much as bullshit as when Biden says it, but it still makes me feel a little bit better.
Aid getting into Gaza.
The aid workers killed: James Henderson, who'd served for 6 years in the Royal Marines, John Chapman, a former member of the British Special Forces, and Army veteran Paul Kirby, who was 47 years old. All were providing security support. Kirby's cousins described him as completely selfless.
He just wanted to help people. He knew that if he didn't go, then someone else would go, and that would probably play on his mind. So James wasn't one of those people that would just sit back.
Just imagine,
after more than 5 months of conflict,
all the like post-military contractor work you can do, and the jobs you're signing up with is to actually deliver humanitarian aid to war zones. You know, the composure. You know, it's just like how so many people who fought in the Iraq War went to fight with the Kurds in Syria.
Yeah,
because it was like a repentance for what they had done.
Public opinion on the soaring casualties is piling pressure on politicians to act. Opinion polls have consistently shown that more people are in favor of a ceasefire than not, and the killing of aid workers in an Israeli airstrike is now prompting outrage, even in traditionally right-wing papers of the British press. Some are seeing this moment as a tipping point in the UK's previously rock-solid support for Israel. The UK government has called for Israel to follow international law, and continues to maintain what Prime Minister...
I said she should have said rock hard. It's funnier.
Mr. Sunak calls a very careful arms licensing arrangement. Human rights groups say that has to end.
We've been calling on the UK government for months to be suspending all of those licenses as part of our international calls for a full-scale arms embargo on all sides to the current conflict.
As the bodies of the victims are repatriated, the shadow of this strike weighs heavily on organizations working to help a region devastated by this conflict. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al.
And today, a U.S. official confirms that President Biden will speak with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow. For more on this, we get two views. Retired Master Sergeant Wes Bryant had a 20-year career in the Air Force and deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. As a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, he called in airstrikes and led air targeting cells. He's also the co-author of Hunting the Caliphate, America's War on ISIS, and Dawn of the Strike Cell. And retired Israeli Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus had a 24-year
They're going to hit their
career
main
in the
points
Israeli
in the
Defense
beginning.
Forces. He commanded combat forces in Lebanon and Gaza, and was most recently an IDF international spokesperson. He's now a senior fellow at the Washington-based think tank, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thanks very much. Welcome, both of you.
The Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Let's Google that and see what that organization is about, huh?
This incident a, quote, misidentification. Can you explain how that's possible when, as the World Central Kitchen says,
I would love to hear it from the IDF spokesperson.
What I understand from the IDF's after-action review, which has not yet been completed, what the IDF has said so far, we are responsible, we are accountable, and this is not Hamas's doing. We did it. That's number one. What they have been able to establish that. What they have not yet been able to establish is how did this misidentification happen, and how was an aid convoy mistaken for a vehicle carrying terrorists, and who made a wrong decision, who misunderstood a very complex and dynamic battlefield, and who got it wrong. I personally know that they are investigating it now, waiting for the outcomes for a transparent and honest after-action review.
Wes Bryant, what's your response to those two words? One, misidentification that we heard from the Chief of the General Staff, and as Jonathan Karika
one of the
said,
most
some kind
asked
of
questions about them is the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy is legit. They've written some good articles and published some good stuff like on drone strikes and stuff. But no, they're not. They suck. I just want to see, like, it says that they were founded after 9/11. So I was trying to see if there's any, like, who's the actual people behind them. Because they're notorious.
Battlefield.
Yes, I appreciate those remarks. Misidentification does, of course, happen in combat, but to me, this strike is just an effect or a demonstration of a broader problem.
Oh, that's where I know them from. This guy I have blocked. This guy's such a douchebag. I literally have this dude blocked here.
That's funny.
This is where I see him a lot. This guy's one of them. This guy is like one of the most annoying Zionists on Twitter. And the way he dehumanizes people is just so gross. He was one of the first people to push the narrative that the Palestinians shot that journalist.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is like
epic.
Big information warfare pusher.
Pattern of indifference towards civilian harm and a pattern of disregard toward international humanitarian law that the IDF has, unfortunately, though being our allies and though having a clear precedent to go after Hamas, which is a dangerous and brutal terrorist organization, that the IDF has unfortunately demonstrated throughout their operation in Gaza.
Jonathan Karika, can you respond to that? Targeting negligence and a disregard for civilian casualties.
Yeah, I think those are very unfortunate and incorrect comments or an assessment of IDF practices. I myself have been in the targeting rooms or the cells where we do those processes. I have seen the process, I've seen the legal overview, and I've seen the intelligence vetting that is done, which is part of protocol before we strike. We operate in an extremely complex environment, unlike expeditionary missions, which I think is the benchmark that you will bring up and give me examples of. But that benchmark is not really relevant because we are talking about defending our homeland here. We do not have the same leisure and time to be super extra careful when it comes to taking out live military targets because our civilians are at risk here. Israel is committed to the international law of armed warfare. Israel takes precaution. Israel uses distinction and proportionality, but that does not mean, sadly, that Palestinian civilians do not get wounded or killed on the battlefield. But the responsibility for that
is this that same guy?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. Recent articles.
2 points. One, there is a difference, as Jonathan Karikas put it, between fighting, as you did, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, and fighting
what do you think,
in Israel itself.
So his latest articles that he's written for other media outlets. Okay, there's 5 in front of me for the latest that's being featured here. Go ahead and pick one. What do you think? What do you think he wrote for? Throw a name out there.
Gray Zone?
No, that's Asada shit, bro. This is Israeli fucking propaganda, right-wing propaganda.
Definitely Fox.
Yep, you nailed it. It is Fox News. That is the one to guess. Nope, it was Fox News. 3 different Fox Newses out of his last 5 articles. And the other one is fucking Daily Wire, I think. No. Whatever this is. The other guy had a Daily Wire article in Fox News. The guy said he was a douchebag.
Yeah.
Fuck these people. Although the Long War Journal was pretty fucking good for the Taliban and stuff. That's me being impartial.
But also
I fucking despise
humanitarian law,
these people.
specifically distinction and proportionality. Do you believe the IDF is following those two tenets?
Well, on the second point, I absolutely don't for the most part.
Love this guy.
I think an over 30,000 casualty ratio, whether or
What's
not
his name?
9 or 10,000 of those are Hamas operatives.
We
It's a
should,
huge ratio between civilian
hit 'em up.
casualties and combatants. With comparing past
I'll
wars
look
with this,
at
yes,
it.
every war has its differences, but urban combat is urban combat, and war. This identification does, of course.
Master Sergeant Wes Bryant.
Yeah, I'm gonna
North
look it up.
Carolina.
I'm gonna look it
War.
up on mine.
More
so I can
importantly,
post
international
it.
humanitarian law is just that. And what I see the IDF doing is taking the principles of military necessity and proportionality and saying that basically any civilian loss that happens is justified because of the military necessity of this target. It's just not the way the U.S. Conducts warfare. Even with the civilian harm that the U.S. has caused, which it has caused civilian harm, and we know that, the U.S. itself would absolutely not be conducting a targeting campaign in the way that IDF has in the last few months. And that's something that I think the whole world is paying attention to, and I think both Israeli and U.S. government need to pay closer attention to.
Jonathan Karikas, you're shaking your head.
Yes, I can personally tell of hundreds of strikes that have been aborted in real time in this war in Gaza because of the presence of children, civilians, women, elderly, and people who we assessed were not enemy combatants, and airstrikes were called off because the proportionality between the military necessity and the importance of
he's got under 400 followers. This guy's definitely
warrant or
followable.
justify
Oh, really?
the killing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's not
send it to
many.
you so you can follow him on the main account to send a probe to him later.
Or the probable wounding of civilians. The Gaza battlefield is an area which is virtually impossible to fight in without having non-combatant casualties. That is how Hamas has rigged the battlefield. That is what we are fighting. And that is the sad reality that we, by trying to move civilians out of the battlefield, have tried to negate. That's what the Israeli Defense Forces did in the beginning. We called on civilians to evacuate because we know that fighting high-intensity warfare in urban terrain is a horrible endeavor that leads to casualties.
Wes Bryant, Hamas has rigged the battlefield. How much does that matter, in your opinion, as you assess the IDF campaign?
Well, Hamas's known use of human shields does not negate the other combatant, IDF in this case, the responsibility to protect civilian and non-combatant
That's
lives.
what's up.
So
just
the IDF
acknowledging the use of human shields and then
Netanyahu
telling him
himself
it
that,
doesn't fucking matter. Love that. Classic John move right there.
Strikes have
and we should take this man at his word. No. This guy's cool. The other guy is FDD. They suck. They suck. They suck. They did do a good the Long War Journal was good during the Afghan war, but that's different, They published they actually did some transparency about war crimes and stuff, but no, fuck that guy. He's a fucking spokesperson for Israel. This guy's just an honest guy who wrote a book called Hunting the Caliphate.
Avoid in some of these cases killing these civilians. Well, unfortunately, through that, IDF has also acknowledged that they are still striking when civilians or involuntary human shields are actually known in the target area. And that's obvious even just from the reporting and the other corroboration that we see. And so that's a problem under U.S. Law of war. That would be a violation of our law of war and international humanitarian law. And under all common interpretations, it would be as well. I don't doubt that the IDF is calling off strikes, is aborting in some cases. They're just not doing it enough.
I know there's a lot more to discuss. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank you both, Wes Bryant, Jonathan Karikas. Thanks very much for both your time.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're done
That
with
was great. I'm glad we sat through that whole thing. I thought it was just going to be a debate. Who cares? Because normally they're terrible. Yeah. Especially Al Jazeera. It's they're so stretched.
Yeah. All right, we're done with Gaza.
Are you aware of a CIA psychological profile about you, sir? Would you be interested in hearing what the CIA had to say? This secret study portrays as a brilliant but dangerous megalomaniac who is likely to pursue his own aims in disregard of U.S. interests. He's an uncertain ally. Shall I go on, or would you prefer that I stop, sir?